Hey everyone, Brad Thorpe from Isophit. Today on Isophit Q&A, we get to my why. Why do I do this? Why do I invest so much time and energy promoting the benefits of isometrics? Well, unfortunately, when my mom was 15 years old, she lost her dad to a massive heart attack. And then when she was 31 years old, she lost her mom to a massive heart attack. The commonality between both parents, hypertension. So today what we're going to talk about is how does Isophit help resolve hypertension. Now I know that gets complicated in the sense that it gets people's backs up and they go, resolve? But my doctor told me I can't get off my medication. Well, I'm here to challenge that theory, to be honest, and here's why. One thing that we always forget to discuss when we're talking about the blood pressure situation, right? We always talk about the atrial system, right? That's how the blood leaves the heart. So you have two components to your circulatory system, really. You have your atrial side, which consists of your heart, your arteries, those little atrials and all these little tiny things. And then you have your venous return side, right? Like the veins, like how does the blood circulate back? So we got this thing called a pump. Yeah, that's your heart. Really important. So don't ever try to live without one. On that note, massive shout out to my man Keith, who is a client of ours, who lives with an LVAD, which is a left ventricular assistive device. His heart doesn't work. He actually has an external heart that circulates his blood, so you don't even need a heart to live. Now, quality of life, that's a different story. But anyways, back on point. How do we resolve hypertension in a population that obviously has it? Well, one thing that we have to think about is your vein structure as a series of little tubes, you know, things that fluid flows through. If I have less contractility in my shoulder joint, what's going to happen is there's going to be a level of distraction, right? If I distract that a little bit, and we're not talking a lot, we're talking like microscopic distraction. Now the problem is we're talking about microscopic structures, so therefore it's important. So if I distract my shoulder structure a little bit, what will happen to the diameter of the artery or vein we're talking about? It narrows a little bit. And it's 100% predictable when you stretch an elastic tube or a rubber tube. The diameter always, 100% of the time, reduces. The thickness of that plastic structure, or in this case the epithelial tissue of the veins or arteries, thin, making them more susceptible to rupturing and stuff like that, which we don't really want. But more importantly, what happens is you end up with a little bit of a crevice, right? Like that, as it stretches, it shrinks, but it also creates a basically almost like a funnel effect. Now, when we're looking at plaque, and we're also looking at the internal structure of the arteries or veins, they have the friction coefficient near ice. So how does stuff and plaque build up? Well, potentially, right? There's not a lot of literature in the medical world about this, but if you look at flow dynamics, if you have sedimentary rock and stuff, and you have like a funnel, you'll have stuff build up and build up and build up and eventually cause a blockage. So how do we work with Isophit to fix this stuff? Well, in 1969, a guy named Dr. Ronald Wiley, he was commissioned by the US Air Force to elevate blood pressure in fighter pilots, found out during his studies that isometrics basically did the inverse of what we wanted, or they wanted to achieve, which was higher blood pressure. They found that with a lot of the fighter pilots, they started to lower their blood pressure with isometrics. That was 1969. We are now in 2021. That's a long time for you to hear this story. So what happened was over the course of a couple weeks, they noticed blood pressure started to drop. Now, a little bit of a personal story. I was challenged with blood pressure issues from the age of 19 when I first noticed to the age of 34. Want to know what stopped my high blood pressure? And it was measured at 150 over 100 when I was 19 years old as a physical specimen doing all kinds of athletic stuff. So what changed was I started doing isometrics. Thank you, McMaster University, who came up with a study, and that allowed me to jump on this bandwagon. But anyways, a lot of the research, what it is 4 minutes of a muscle contraction. The traditional stuff was basically take your non-dominant hand and squeeze something. right? It could be a ball, it could be a bar, it could be a tennis racket. But one of the things that we did, or they did, sorry, was they used a grip strength dynamometer. And they squeezed that dynamometer for 4 rounds of 2 minutes at a perceived level of intensity of 30%. So nothing crazy. It didn't have to be hard. It just had to be something. Now, if I increase the contractility to my non-dominant side, how can that help? Well, if this is going to now compress better because I've increased tensile capabilities of my muscular system, so it's like taking a tube off of stretch. So what happens is that if I had a stretch tube and I take that off stretch, it goes from narrow to wide. The epithelial tissues go from thin to thicker, and that's going to aid in basically the compressibility and the flow throughout the system. Now, it gets more interesting when you start to look at the circulatory system, or sorry, not the circulatory system, that's what we're talking about, the venous side. It houses 65% of your blood volume equation. So if I truly want to have a massive, massive impact on resolving my blood pressure, I need a different approach than say, hey, go do cardio training, because the cardio training side really only focuses on 35%. And remember, I said your heart's important, so I'm not saying it's not. But if I want to make a major change and have immediate impact, I'm going to start focusing on the larger side of the equation that I can create change. I don't want to focus on 35%. I want to focus on improving 65%. And we all know that the return phase of blood in the venous side is controlled via a muscle pump, right? And that's the accumulation of all muscles in your body work to pump the blood back. That means if you have an inefficient muscular system, you're going to have an inefficient circulatory system. And unfortunately, hypertension is still one of the leading causes of death globally. Anyways, 2 minutes, 4 times a day, squeeze a tennis ball. If you have an Isophit, you can use that. You can also do a wall sit. It's a little bit harder, but it's really just about doing isometrics. They seem to really, really work. And the results are significantly better than dynamic exercise. And we're not talking a little bit. Like if this is basically me racing against Usain Bolt, he's isometrics, I'm dynamic exercise, he's crushing me. That's the difference between isometrics and dynamic exercise. And I didn't say it was bad, I just said it was less efficient. So don't get your tizzy in a knots. I'll see you tomorrow on Isophit Q&A.